We've come a long way since the wax cylinder and the 78. The LP record means the public can enjoy music at home. It's the 1950s and time to rock and roll. In Britain, skiffle is invented as an easy musical start. Popular music takes off.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
Pop music electrifies teenagers and they can't get enough.
'Cause this land's the place I love.
Hey, hey, you get out of my crowd. Hey, hey, you get out.
Suddenly, everyone is writing their own songs.
You really got me now. You got me so, you got me with me.
With freedom to experiment comes the swinging 60s.
No colors anymore, I want them to turn black. I see the girls with my dressed in their summer clothes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
New TV shows appear.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Pirate radio shakes up the government-controlled airwaves.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Until the government bans it and starts Radio 1, the only national pop network.
Skip the light fandango.
This is a time to explore every new experience.
Wheels cross the floor.
Music and fashion become closely linked.
Next week news and stripe, but he's a dedicated follower of fashion.
With Sergeant Pepper's lonely.
The art world includes these fresh ideas. Artists forge their own identities. The album becomes a separate format.
It's alright now. She ain't no witch.
The single still reigns supreme.
She ain't no witch, and I love the way she twitch. It's so sissy and a silent attack.
Image and music come together in glam rock.
Oh God, I could do better than that.
By 1974, the album is the most profitable format.
Don't get me back to good bullshit.
Album artists can achieve success through touring rather than teen appeal. The music press supports rock, but there is only one TV programme, the old grey whistle test.
Knocking on heaven's door.
But radio still plays only singles.
Baby, you just ain't into nothing yet.
You can go your own way.
US rock does well, and some artists even have hits.
Welcome to the Hotel California.
In reaction to this, new music is created in New York and copied in London, where punk rock is born.
I am an antichrist.
Dozens of labels start, including Chiswick and Stiff.
She is watching the detectives. Oh, you're so cute. Say drugs and rock and roll.
absorb the threat, although A&M and EMI lose the Sex Pistols, who have huge success on Virgin. The market still likes melody. TV compilations arrive with Golden Greats, which end up as bestsellers.
Diana Ross and the Supremes. 20 Golden Greats, 20 beautiful tracks on record or tape.
My best friend's girlfriend.
With New Wave comes packaging and picture bags. Assaults on the charts begin. At the same time, Saturday Night Fever strikes. Then the compact disc is invented. The industry hopes for 3 sales per person in the first year. The average is 12. In 1983, Gallup starts to compile the charts, the world's most accurate. No airplay factor is included, just hard sales data. Airplay depends on chart positions, and every release has something special.
Now 8 has arrived, starring Duran Duran.
TV ads increase and the hits album comes into its own.
Jermaine Stewart and Cameo.
In the US, MTV needs videos, and British artists fit the bill.
Love is a stranger in an open car to tempt you in and drive you far away.
US sales spark a huge investment in UK A&R.
Make me cry. Come on, baby. Oh, I swear, baby. Oh, come on, let's take everything.
Yes, I wish it would rain down on me now.
Tell me lies.
Follow-through campaigns create big album sales.
Tango in the Night, the new album from Fleetwood Mac.
Chart splits up in formats and styles. The producer takes control and pure pop dominates. Rap and sampling starts to affect UK productions. Hits come from many different sources.
Well, don't you worry, baby, don't worry, 'cause I'm right here at home. 'Cause I'm a picker, I'm a grinner, I'm a lover.
Cover versions are common.
Come on, to the London Ocean with me. I'm your Venus, I'm your fire.
Then the recession hits and companies consolidate.
I'm your Venus, I'm your fire.
So where does this leave us in 1992? Let's take a look. The CD is the UK's leading carrier.
Now, when I was a young boy,
A third of singles are dance tracks, but only 9% of albums. Multi-artist albums account for more than 1 in every 7 purchases.
the greatest man alive.
Classical music is a major part of the album market.
Way past 21.
Charts are dominated by UK and US artists.
I have lots of
Only 7 retailers control more than 60% of the market. But despite Britain being around 9% of the world market, her artists account for around 24% of the world's music.
in.
And Virgin is right up there in the top 5 companies. So, to bring us completely up to date, here's Paul Conroy.
That was then, and this is now. We now move on to a new section to talk about retail and how we deal with it today. This is an Our Price shop in Chiswick. Our Price is one of the 7 chains in the country which control 70% of the music business. So we went over to speak to Glenn Ward, who's the head of product management at HMV, to find out what's really happening in the retail world.
HMV is a chain of 92 stores in the UK. We currently have about 14% market share. We're also an international record retailer with representation in the States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and Ireland. It's very competitive now. There's been a lot of development in the UK over the last couple of years, various acquisitions taking place. Currently there's ourselves taking up the lion's share with Our Price and WH Smith and Woolworths, but recent acquisition by WH Smith of Virgin has given them another sector of the market which they're targeting. So very competitive, I think, is the word for it, even aggressive. The Oxford Circuit store will stock everything. It has a database of over 200,000 titles, which is probably the largest database in the world, I would have thought. They have, obviously an extreme example there, being the largest record store in the world. But we've also got a store in Sunderland, which is only 600 square feet. So the demands are obviously a lot more different for that store. And consequently, they would be rejecting quite a bit of stock on the basis of inability to display it sufficiently.
The singles chart is very important to us in the UK, but it's a very short-run chart, as we can see from this single, which is now in the 99p section in the racks here, which is the dumper bin for records. We went over to John Pinder at Gallup to find out how the singles chart works.
The chart in the UK is compiled from sales from 1,500 outlets. That's roughly 1 in 3 outlets across the country. It's carefully selected by TV region and by shop type. In the smaller stores, we install these small Epson devices for data capture, and with the larger multiple retailers, we collect their sales direct from their central EPOS systems, their in-store tills. The average chart life for a single these days is probably 4 or 5 weeks. Obviously there are exceptions to that rule. Some singles bubble under for weeks and finally hit the top. The album chart is slightly different in that some products can last for years on chart. Bat Out of Hell, for example, has been in the top 200 ever since we started doing the charts in 1983. So it's a different kind of pattern.
This is Carnaby Street, home of the swinging 60s, where I used to come and buy my flared hipster trousers and go to a club just along here on the right and see Gino Washington, the Ram Jam Band, and Georgie Fame, and pop those infamous pills that would keep me going all night. But what's happening nowadays? Let's go over to Ian Fairbrother, media consultant, and find out. Meanwhile, I'll join all these tourists buying a bit of London.
The influence of the record business is becoming less and less. I think music in total is having less and less influence. I think that if you like, the longevity of acts like the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton really is symptomatic of the fact that there is much less new talent coming through, and that really concerns young people. I mean, I suppose that Guns N' Roses is kind of an exception, but people aren't really as interested in Guns N' Roses now as say they would have been about the Rolling Stones back in the mid-60s.
There's been a lot of talk over the last few years of the death of the single, and people talk about the great decline. What's essentially happened is the singles market has mirrored the demographics of the teenage population. So we've seen a huge increase in the late 70s, early 80s in singles buying, which has fallen away throughout the late 80s.
I believe on the album format we've certainly encouraged bands like the Proclaimers. They were given a lot of support with representation in our chart and touring our stores, PAs and the like before the single broke with them.
There doesn't seem to be very much attempt to actually try and go out and try and persuade a consumer to actually change his habits to go into a particular record store and look up a particular album. That really seems to be a very secondary side. The main aim seems to be to get the record company to stock the product in the first place, and then there's a sort of assumption that the product will probably move off the shelves on its own, or at least will move off the shelves more through radio airplay and possibly on some of the newer sort of satellite channels being featured on MTV, say, or on Radio 1 or Capital Radio.
So we have small quarter-page press ads, which could be a few £100, to 2 weeks on television nationwide, which would be about £90,000. So we're hoping that we have the most flexible marketing package now to accommodate the requirements of the record companies.
The music industry's use of mainstream medium is at best half-hearted. Perhaps the most serious use outside record companies is with Our Price Records, who have actually made an attempt to brand their record stores in a particular kind of way. And what they clearly do is go to record companies to get them to subcontract some of the money, so that if you like, the record company shares the cost of the ad. But the real effect of the ad over time is to brand Our Price records and the particular kinds of records they sell.
If you'll be my bodyguard.
Paul Simon with the smash hit You Can Call Me Al, and his new single Boy in the Bubble.
It's clearly a much better deal for Our Price, because what it's essentially doing over time is sustaining a brand image for Our Price.
2 brilliant tracks from his much acclaimed album Graceland. If you're bursting to get it, pop down to Our Price now.
This is Olympic Studios, one of the many studios around town where established groups and the up-and-comers go in to make their records. But what happens to these records after they're made? They're taken up to Radio 1. And the man who knows all about that and how to get records on the playlist is Tony Barker.
Here I am outside the hallowed portals of the BBC. This is the world-famous broadcasting house where BBC Radio has been established for many decades now. This is where I spend probably about 50% of my working week talking and dealing with the people of Britain's only national pop music station, Radio 1. Let's go inside and have a chat with a few Radio 1 producers, the guys who decide what records Radio 1 play. By the way, it's not this rather impressive looking building behind me where Radio 1 is based. It's this rather less impressive looking one over here. It shows what they think of pop music at the BBC.
I believe that we are all things to all people, and there's a very simple reason for that. People pay a licence fee to listen to us. Everybody deserves to listen to popular music expressed well by Radio 1, because we're a national station, we're not government owned, we're not sponsored, we don't carry any advertisements. We must use those almost God-given privileges to try and please everybody all the time.
Basically in this country we have one national pop music station, which is Radio 1, the BBC station, and really that has a monopoly on all broadcasting, if you like. Any record success depends almost entirely in terms of radio on getting airplay on that one station.
I think what a promotions man does now is far more complex, and we keep them as an industry they're obliged to serve much more busy. They've got to know all the tour details. They've got to know when they can get hold of the artists, because we're tremendously demanding about getting hold of the artists themselves. They've got to know all their details about all their release schedules. It's not the lackadaisical bang this on the turntable and see if you like it stuff.
A lot of the producers just don't spend the time listening to the records that they're presenting and don't give a valued assessment of those records. That's really where the pluggers come into their own. The pluggers go in and remind these producers, play again, give them extra information, what have you, encourage them to play it, encourage them to listen to it again.
I mean, I can give you one perfect example when one promotion man who's no longer in the business and doesn't deserve to be actually came round with the latest single from Lou Rawls, an artist I think is really great singer and great background. And to promote that, he brought round a whole load of toilet rolls with the name Lou Rawls on it. Now, I just thought that was totally stupid and totally out of order. And, and I would have loved to have played the record, but because he was promoting it in such a stupid fashion, there's no way I was going to program it.
Records are presented to the playlist every Monday morning. Probably about 25 out of the 100 releases every week are presented to the playlist. And of those 25, possibly about 6 or 7 go on the playlist, either the A or the B. So you can imagine you're left with about anywhere between 85 and 95 releases that week that don't make the playlist. Add on top of that the previous week's releases, and you can see the difficulty in trying to gain any worthwhile exposure on our only national pop station.
We have an actual playlist which is about 50 records strong. Of course, add-ons in any one particular week can go into 2 separate categories. We have an A-list and a B-list. It's extremely rare for a single to go straight onto the A-list. An example might be Genesis. We know we have a tremendously popular international act. It's sensible to put them straight on there. There's definitely an audience demand.
We all recognise, I think, the singles chart doesn't reflect public taste. I'm afraid certainly most of the commercial stations, and Radio 1 to an extent, do tend to perhaps dwell too much, set too much store by the top 40, the singles chart.
On the sort of consensus of the albums that we all thought were good from a particular week or a particular month, that list used to go down and be put in front of the playlist committee, because they didn't perhaps have as much time as we did, because they were building longer programmes and more programmes than we were. And the idea was that a lot of those album tracks were supposed to filter into the daytime play. Well, I must admit, I never heard the result of it at all.
There isn't enough exposure, no matter how the efforts that Radio 1 have made in that direction are worthy, and we're pleased about that. But we do need an album track station, very much so.
Lots of people could run national networks just on albums, as I said, or on the top 40 or oldies, yes, you could do it. But we shouldn't be doing just one of any of those things. We should be doing a whole lot, you know, so that for people who like to hear a variety of different music, then we're still there. Hopefully with an audience of some sort. Not too many Chelsea supporters there.
We're all the mighty moguls of the record industry. We think we know what's happening. Well, we don't know anything. It's out here on the street. These are the people who will tell us really what's happening, and they may give us some pretty frightening answers.
And the album is too much money, the rip-off, man, too much money.
It costs about 5p to make a CD, and they're selling for about £11, so you won't catch you buying a CD at that price.
I mean, I don't buy them very often, I record them off a friend.
I feel I'm overpaying for my compact disc compared to what I would pay for a cassette or a record.
I don't buy records these days.
I listen to my boyfriend's music and I listen to the radio, so I don't feel the need to buy my own records.
How much do you think CDs should cost?
$5.99. I prefer to pay about 5 or 6. I think that's kind of fair. But
£5 is more than reasonable for the CDs.
£5 would be an excellent price.
What I'd like to pay is about what they charge in America, which is about £7 or £8. What I expect to pay is 13.
Excuse me, sir, can I ask you a few questions? Yeah. Do you buy records?
No, mate. I get my mates to do me tapes.
You home tape, do you?
Yeah, what I do is my mates are DJs and that.
Right.
They run them off on turntables. They do me tapes. So,
so they get free records from the record companies and these, do they?
Some of them on mailing list.
So you're no help to the record industry at all. There you are.
Really?
Eh?
No,
what can
really.
I say? Do you go to concerts? No? Nothing. Clubs.
Up London.
Yeah.
Saturday night.
What sort of records do you like?
Yeah, hardcore.
Hardcore.
Rave music.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Well,
okay. See you. Home taping. Killing music. What can I say? Although we have an album chart in the UK, the most important thing to be in is the retailers chart. And as we can see in this Our Price chart this week, Genesis, Madness and The Greatest Dance Album are all in good positions. The man who has to organise this, the man in the hot seat himself, Mr. Shaky, the nervous hand, Mike Lawrence.
An album's initial success is dependent on having a hit single, and if that hit single doesn't come before the release of the album, the chain certainly will be hesitant to stock it in full.
It is evident in the way they construct their playlists that it is quite the reverse. It is geared towards the top 40. Quite often you'll find a single that they've ignored for a couple of weeks will go in the top 40 through another route, maybe TV exposure, what have you, and it will suddenly magically appear on the playlist. And again, if the single starts to go down the chart, instantly off.
Chart placing gives an element of airplay, hopefully, and obviously other exposure, TV exposure, etc.
All the time they're saying, come on, when can we drop this? When can we drop this off the playlist? And it gets a ridiculous roundabout, you know, where really you can expect a maximum of 3 weeks on the playlist if the single hasn't made an impressive chart entry.
Top of the Pops as a performance on TV is very important, and indeed any TV is important because it reaches so many people.
Now, unfortunately, we have about 3 slots. The chart show, which just features on video, and a couple of children's shows, kiddie shows, really. Very little else. Anything else we go for is really part of a chat show, like a Wogan or something, you know, a slot on the chat show. The situation here at the moment is desperate. It's gone from bad to worse in the last year in terms of TV. Particularly the BBC, it has to be said, just don't like music on TV. They don't see it get the figures, the viewing figures, and I think if they had their way, they'd knock it on the head completely.
When we go to the retailers to present product, there is a point at which their order will need, certainly with the major chains, to have an element of marketing, of either solus marketing that will establish a presence for the artist in the marketplace, or cooperative marketing that will allow the individual chain to get their slice of the initial sales.
That we put a percentage of the cooperative spend in there, but what we also do is devote the space in store and support in store in these high street properties where we're paying very high premium rental.
Record retailers have to react very quickly to changing trends and to upcoming artists in order to maximise their sales and not to lose sales to the competition.
We would argue that now the industry maybe needs to look at 3-4 years down the line, and if an artist is going to have 2 or 3 albums coming through, then it's just an awareness building. So if you're looking at an investment over a period of return in 3 years, then maybe the album that you invest on with promotion at first release, you may not get the return on sales. But when the second album comes through, it's going to be a lot easier to invest that same 90,000 and get more than your money's worth on the £90,000.
There have been times when the level of our support was not equitable to the level of their support, in which case there have been a few tears in the past.
Over the past few years, there's definitely been a divergence between the two charts, the singles charts and the album chart. Partly because of the strength of dance music and its influence on the singles chart. And these sales often haven't crossed over into the album market, except maybe on compilation albums.
Dance records, they believe, and I must admit I tend to agree, do not make good radio. They come from the clubs, that's where they're based, that's where they have their appeal. And also the nature of the single releases, they fly straight in the chart and fly straight out.
The people who go for the albums market, I suppose, are no longer the people who look at Top of the Pops or even buy singles, which is presumably the reason why singles have plummeted so much in the last few years.
I think that the singles chart can now be effectively dominated by a dance record that's being largely bought by those who are actually going to personally play that record to a crowd on Friday, Saturday night. They can have a tremendous effect on a record, and the albums, however, are being bought by people who actually want to take that record home and listen to it not once, not twice, but in some instances thousands upon thousands of times.
The UK chart nowadays is still totally dominated by UK and US product, in particular UK product, which is probably around 55% of the singles chart is UK-based product. There's very little coming through from the rest of the world. A bit of dance music is coming through over the last few years from Italy and Belgium, but apart from that, very little from the rest of the world.
There's obviously problems because of the recession that we're in, but I think there'll obviously always be 10 records in the top 10, and people will always want to have music.
What do you spend your spare money on?
I'm saving for computer games. I'm saving up for a new guitar.
A Nintendo one costs about £90 now.
Nothing, I've just paid for a holiday.
A pair of jeans were under £50, I like some, I'll pay for it.
Sport, reading books, studying, that sort of thing.
I would say that television has taken much more of a share of the average teenager's time. And so record companies are increasingly being marginalised by other activities, desktop computers and so on, because they're not really competing in the same way for attention.
We had an experiment 9 months ago and put computer games into 3 stores. That was relatively successful, and we're now rolling it out. But it is still, it's got to be stressed, it's on phase 2 really of our experiment. We're just still monitoring what the effect of that is. And one of the key parts to that experiment is to see how it impacts our music business. I'd hate to think that people were coming in with £50 in their pockets, intending to buy CDs, but then finished up probably only spending £30 or £40 on a computer game.
What do you think the future of the music industry is going to be?
I think there should be more kind of interest in young bands, definitely.
A lot of record companies don't put enough money into helping new live bands. Virgin did a Todd Terry one recently, didn't they? The Grid Todd Terry remix is excellent.
Very good.
Yeah, but that's rare though, for that sort of stuff to come out through a label like them, because they're too big, they're too clumsy, they can't handle that sort of fast-moving, week-to-week changes in what people want.
Yeah, keep plugging younger bands, leave the old fogies alone.
If you think about all the great bands now, the bands that have had some kind of longevity, bands of ours like Simple Minds or The Cure for Polydor, those bands started off as being very left field, and it was only through gigging and just general building up a following that they ever managed to make it to the kind of huge heights they have now. Now, those bands weren't picked up by radio or TV, or not at least by mainstream radio or TV, for years and years, but those bands persevered and got through in the end. Now, if A&R departments are not going to sign acts like that, then they're missing out on the big sellers of the future.
I have a concern about the men in grey suits and their involvement with the industry. And I would dearly love to see the passion and conviction come back into the industry, and that's a very sweeping statement, but I think it does have an underlying reality about it.
There you go, you've seen their side of the story. Now let's see what we're trying to do about it at the moment. Focus on fewer artists. Be more selective with future signings. Keep making better and more exciting records. Cover all musical bases with Virgin's niche label. Keep covering all aspects of the catalogue. Set up releases better with time for planning. And keep chasing every sale. And now for something completely different. As you've been so interested in this presentation, I decided I'd do a 3-hour slide presentation. So those people hoping to creep off to the bar and have a bit of